Hey everybody, my name is Jay, and this is I Have a Samurai. And today we are going to be joined with a special guest who has as much water as I hope is necessary in order to get through this entire conversation. He's the person that you're also seeing on the screen on your right, who's just barely getting situated with his glasses and about to play against Saiyne at the second NLBC monthly. His name. Well, I mean, what else can I say about him? His name is Linkorz.
That's my name,
It's true.
as my mother named me.
That's what Linkorz is his name, or his mom decided to name him. But
Fair
we are
enough.
going to try and talk about the grand final set that he had with Saiyne at the most recent NLBC monthly. So Link, you have had a pretty extensive history against Saiyne, spanning over two different games, uh, both SE5 and SE6. What is your normal mindset going into a set against Saiyne? Is it something that changes pretty often, or do you have kind of an idea as to what you want to do each time?
So it's a bit hard to say because it's pretty ingrained into my head at this point that I don't really have to articulate it in order to understand it. But if I had to say, it would be that like sometimes I think the crux of it is that sometimes it feels like you can't hit him, and when you feel like you can't hit him, that the most important thing to do is to not get frustrated and just keep trying to hit him,
Yeah, don't
and just
panic.
yeah, don't panic,
Yeah.
and just relax. And I guess relaxing and just not overextending, I think, is my main goal when I'm playing against Sane.
So I'm sure you would agree that Sane's playstyle overall is considered to be, let's say, unusual, relatively surprising. Not really something that you really see from a lot of Ivy. Well, not really see something that you see from the community just in general. And so I guess the idea is that you're talking about how just based on how Saiyne can be very unpredictable and unusual, you just kind of try and ride that wave
Mhm.
without being pulled in a little bit. Would that be a fairly reasonable allegory for how to deal with Saiyne?
Yeah, I would say so. That sounds about right.
Okay. So, like I said, that this is the grand finals set. You were in winners, so Saiyne was going to need to win 3-3 in order to win the tournament. It's going to be Ivy versus Siegfried, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you have felt more comfortable with the Ivy matchup as time has gone on. But there was certainly a time, especially in the beginning, when Ivy was quite the terrorist,
Yeah.
that this was an incredibly irritating matchup for you.
Yeah, so when the game first came out, I hated Ivy more than anything.
Right.
Um, there was like a 2 month period where she was the only character I'd ever lost to in SC6.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I just got really, really used to fighting her, and they've nerfed her a lot since then. Uh, and now I feel pretty confident against the character, and confident in the matchup too. I definitely think Siegfried. Again, they've buffed Siegfried and they've nerfed Ivy
Yeah.
over the course of the game, and I think that it definitely feels favorable for Siegfried.
See, for somebody like me who is used to you backing up so very often when you're playing Siegfried, I would have thought that this matchup would be relatively difficult or unusual because you can't necessarily space as well against a character like Ivy, and Siegfried kind of has to. Would it be reasonable for me to say that Siegfried is forced to go in against Ivy in this matchup? And if so, how exactly is that very comfortable for the Siegfried in this matchup?
So basically, like from the range that Ivy, almost there's so many ranges where I can just contest everything she's doing with A slide B. Like most characters can't contest her because she's zoning them out. So it's effective. Um, but with Siegfried, I can be at a range where most moves won't hit her, but I can just do A slide B, and even if she blocks it, because she doesn't have a 2A, and
Right.
her
Okay.
her launchers aren't like really that scary on normal hit.
Yeah.
Um, it's challenging for her to deal with on block. So basically, I think that the matchup kind of comes down to me being able to just jam A slide B down her throat, and then I can just keep her movement in check with 3A4 and get guard damage going. Yeah, I feel like I can. keep her contained pretty easily with A slide B. Always keeping close. I can definitely compete, maybe even beat her in damage, which not a lot of characters can.
Okay, so it's about trying to staying into the pocket, so to speak, of trying to make sure that A slide B is always going to be a constant threat, to the point where it kind of like minimizes her options, and then you just rely on stuff like guard damage and patience to kind of win the day.
Yeah, and Siegfried does have a lot of grab range, so that helps a lot too.
That is true.
Because you're doing so much A slide B that they're not going to want to duck ever.
Yeah. So the last thing before the match ends up starting, I'm noticing that we're on the gigantic stage that's all walls. And now I would assume that Siegfried wins out pretty heavily. I would imagine as the Siegfried player that you were very relieved to see a stage like this. You have tons of wall... I mean, Ivy's wall combos aren't that shabby as well, but I find that Siegfried's wall pressure and wall combos are incredibly good, and you don't have to worry about any ring outs. So this really seems like a solid stage for you.
Yeah, no, I was definitely happy when I saw this stage.
Yeah, okay. So we've got, let's get this going. We've got Link on the left with Siegfried versus Saiyne playing Ivy on the right. Right off the bat, both players run right into each other, which is very much something that I find unusual when I play against both these players.
Usually Linkorz comes out on top, but I'm sure...
So he's got, it seems like... Yeah, it would seem like I'm definitely seeing the kind of guard pressure that you're talking about. It seems like in a lot of situations right at the very beginning, basically any time that you have the ability to relieve a certain amount of pressure, you end up going for a 3A4.
Yeah, and that's not for like the spacing or anything. It's because it's going. So Saiyne is it's like I was saying earlier, where he's very active.
Yeah.
And he can feel like he's like a little, like he's hard to hit. But 3A4 is, I mean, it's a mid horizontal. And it's kind of slow, but it's a mid horizontal. It does a lot of damage, and it does a lot of guard damage.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if I'm up close, it's not putting me. I don't really want to push her out too much. So I do try to keep the move to when I'm very close to her, so that when it pushes her out, it doesn't really push her out to a spacing that's uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, it's not really a spacing 3A4, it's a timing 3A4, and trying to lean on the fact that her Ivy's 2A isn't exactly the strongest poke that you could have.
Yeah. He's already in the red, by the way.
Yeah. I'm definitely seeing that kind of thing.
Yellow. Now he's
it's just 3A4. It's just every single time.
Yeah.
Oh, he doesn't end up punishing the jump kicks there. So I'm assuming that was supposed to be a 3A4 at the end of the round as well.
No, that was supposed to be 3A.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to mix him up with it.
Yeah. So he wasn't punishing some of the stuff that you can block punish. Nice duck there into a relatively solid punish. It's not very often that a lot of people get that kind of damage off of that wall rising punish. So I think that's the second or third time that you've already gone. Wow, you already have a guard break. So you end up going for a CE here, and this is something when I was watching this match that I kind of noticed. With a CE, now I'm not 100% sure on Siegfried guard break combos and everything, but in terms of damage, or maybe in terms of stage positioning, I feel like there was a different combo you could have gone for, but I'm assuming because you were ahead, and because you have the meter, that you're using the meter to kind of lean on getting Dark Legacy stacks. Am I safe in saying that? Yeah.
Yeah, so like the way I see it is that if I'm not, like, I'm trying to trade one resource for another, right? I have the guard damage, and I can't kill him with it, or put it in a situation where I could easily kill him. So I'm kind of trying to invest the break so that I can use it later with Dark Legacy.
Now, would you say that this is something that you would only do if you were ahead? Or would that be something that you would have done even if you were the one who lost the first round?
If I had lost the first round, I probably would not have taken the break there unless it was going to kill.
Okay. That was a heavily ambitious stance pressure there, trying to get all the way in. Wow. I wasn't aware of how obnoxious Saiyne was going to get with the shoulder. I find that, especially in Season 2, Saiyne has gotten significantly more obnoxious with the shoulder. I'm not sure if it changed, but definitely wow, that was an incredible jump.
Yeah.
That was actually a really incredible jump because you had gone mid every other time. and he hadn't really punished it either.
Yeah. It's important to do stuff like jump and sidestep when Siegfried's in Dark Legacy and mixing you up with reverse side hold.
Yeah, I guess I've tended to always go for something like oh, actually, I want to pause it here just for a second. But I end up like thinking about reversal edges whenever I'm dealing with Siegfried. I'm not saying that's definitely the way to go, and especially with Ivy's reversal edge being the way it is, it probably isn't. But that's just tends to be like what I always think about. Now, the one thing that I wanted to mention, as I'm sure most people know about you if they're following the matches that you've had against Ivy, is you don't really get command grabbed. It's not really something that happens very often. Is it reasonable to say that if you're dealing with Ivy and you don't have to, as long as you always have the command grab kind of like in the back of your mind, and you're always matching to a certain degree to where you're keeping it in check, that there's no real reason to duck against Ivy, especially in close? There's no real mix-up there.
Well, there is, because she has Summon Suffering.
Which isn't really something that I see Saiyne doing all that often.
Yeah, and it's not. And it's something I really think that he should do more. Like, when I fight, like, Holy Carp or Kinetic Clash, they do it like the input is just A plus G.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that's what I think you should be doing. I think Summon Suffering is a lot more consistent and reliable, and because, like, again, like I was saying earlier, Ivy's, like, mid-launchers aren't very threatening.
Right.
Like, you know, she has 6 BB and she has 3B, but those do, like, something around 40 damage, which is less than CS.
They get, like, a knockdown, but at the same time, it's not exactly the most powerful Oki position in the world, and, you know, it's something that you can just kind of get back up and stuff.
Yeah, it can depend on what she hits you with, but yeah. So yeah, I think that using Summon Suffering is... I think that if you're fighting an Ivy that's using Summon Suffering, you should actually be ducking more than you should be stand blocking.
Yeah. They'll tend to use it almost as if kind of just like a timing. Very much similar to the way that you're using 3A4.
Yeah, a little bit.
So it seems like we got
Yeah, I just did that.
Well, I mean, you know, again, you're around ahead. And that's something that I think is going to be becoming more and more popular as time goes on, is using an RI to try and get away from... Wow, he's literally only pressed the back of the D-pad for the past, like, 15 seconds. Which I guess is something that you're going to deal with when you're playing against Ivy. I noticed you... I assume that you dropped the punish intentionally to try and create a better Oki situation.
Yeah, because, like, you know, he was ahead of me, and he was... Like, I would have been neutral on hit and pushed him out a little bit, and it wouldn't have been...
Yeah. Siegfried with the block punishment isn't exactly the strongest unless he gets the AGA lethal hit.
Yeah, his -12 and -14 block punishment is not very strong.
Now that I think about it, it's kind of interesting that you're using 3A4 still, because we're at 2 and 2, so it's not exactly like the guard damage is going to really come into effect this time around.
Right, well, it's not just guard damage is the thing. Like, I'm also trying to... And first off, it is. he's already in the yellow.
You know what? I'm sorely mistaken. He's in the red.
But it's at that point, it's mostly just to, like, keep him in check.
Right, yeah. Trying to keep him honest.
Yeah, exactly. And that
wow, what a hell of an RI. Wow, that's spaghetti.
Yeah.
Look at your face.
Yeah. I thought I had the read with that A plus B.
Yeah, so okay. So you were irritated with the fact that the A plus B, like, didn't pan out?
Yeah, it was wrong, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a shame. I feel like Saiyne had decided... Now, this is very interesting. He decides to stick with this stage. I'm not entirely sure why he would want... Because it's big, because he gets the opportunity to backdash a whole lot, but he's not really... I'm not really seeing Saiyne try and play that mid-rangey game that I'm used to seeing, and I guess it's because of what you were talking about before, where you have the ability to stay in the pocket and use A slide B to kind of mitigate any of that kind of mid-range stuff. I either see him right in your face trying to do mix-uppy kind of stuff and losing to 3A4, or he's backstepping like there's no tomorrow, hoping that you're going to make a mistake. Do you know why Saiyne would want to keep the stage?
Well, the only inkling that I would have is that I've seen him, like, when I've seen him get to desert stage, or, like, the waterfall stage,
yeah,
and then lose and switch it. And he said that it's because he focuses too much on the ring outs and gets himself killed a lot of the time because of it.
Okay.
So that might have something to do with it. But
So-
I still
Okay.
feel like he could have gotten a better stage.
Yeah, I guess he was just hoping that the size of the stage was going to win the day.
Yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, I can definitely see what he's talking about when it comes to relying too heavily on what should be the obvious option as to what the character should. That kind of happens with people who play Purple Amy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot is because you've spent all this time trying to get purple. So now you absolutely have to use the tools that purple ends up giving you. This is one of the main reasons why I think that red is so good, is because the red tools are really good and they're not that slow. So more often than not, when the very, very, very few times that I get purple, I think to myself, man, I would have been just doing a lot better if I had just gone with red only.
Right.
So yeah, I guess this is kind of the same situation that I was talking about before, where you did end up losing the first round, but you're going to go with the CE here to potentially like get stacks up.
Right.
And,
Well,
yeah.
I was also like, I knew that would put me in a position where I had a pretty significant life lead,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like I had enough meter that I would be able to cash into it again later. Because I already have another bar for another CE.
Yeah, that's true. Plus, he ends up trying to go for like a wake up CE there, but this is very much not the beginning of the game in season 1 where that CE is incredibly powerful. Probably Ivy CE probably the weakest. What's a CE that's weaker than Ivy CE? Hard to say.
Yeah, I couldn't say offhand.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
But I think the reason he does it is because of A slide B.
Huh.
Because it only parries verticals now.
Yeah.
And he's definitely hit me with it before because I'm just jamming A slide B down his throat.
Fantastic
I don't
punish.
know why I decided. Yeah, I have no idea why I decided to go for that, but it worked.
Yeah, that was incredible because I believe the 3B punish was botched the first time around, so
Yeah,
that was interesting.
Yeah. By the
So,
way,
yeah,
that's the first time I've ever done that.
Yeah. So it seems like, okay, I'm noticing that, again, the amount of times, like, I'm not really seeing Saiyne going for stuff like IV66A or any of those kinds of horizontals that I'm used to seeing. That was a bit ambitious for that.
That was an RI. That was an RI. I tried to wake up
okay.
RI, and it came out as reversal edge.
Right, because of the
Very
same thing in
frustrating,
in the first game, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not really seeing use a lot of the horizontals that I'm used to seeing from Ivy, and I wouldn't think that base hold is that big of a deal because at the ranges that I'm talking about, where you're kind of like at a mid range, I wouldn't expect it to actually like catch all that much. So I'm not sure why.
I think something that he's really scared of is that I feel like you can kind of, when you're at like this range, like around this range here.
Let me see if I can
where we
back it
were
up like just a little bit to see if I can like catch it. Because it's definitely not like the full range that we're talking about. We're kind of talking about like in between
Like,
him,
right
like
around
running up.
right around here, I'd say.
Yeah.
I can see that he's gonna do 6-6A hold and back up and then dash back in and whiff punish. And I think that that's kind of what he's scared of.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely not something that I'm used to as an aiming player. I don't really... I would have to have backstep 6-6A to such a perfect degree just to get the 6-6A plus B as a whiff punish before she recovers in time. I barely even go for it because it's very difficult to time that sort of thing. Siegfried doesn't necessarily have that problem.
I would say you should do run in 2-2B. When I play Geralt, I do run in 3-3B.
I don't know if it's... Yeah, you're probably right. But
I might not have enough range. I don't know.
Yeah, again, that would be something where I would have had to have backstepped it, where there's like no slack. You know what I mean? I had just a pixel away from potentially getting hit.
Right, I know.
Now that being said, technically speaking, what I could be doing is just C6-6A and mid parry on reaction into AMSBB. That tends to be the way to go. But that's more of like a GI kind of centric idea, which is not really something that I see you do very often with GIs. The only time that I see you doing is a GI is an RI. Wow, that was an ambitious 1.5. I think he did that in the beginning of the game as well, to try and get that unblockable. I can understand the timing of it, but yeah, it's not really working all that much. And here we just have guard damage, plus Dark Legacy, plus the wall. This is kind of what I was talking about when it comes to why this stage wouldn't be a great idea. And he goes for a CE there too. I don't know so much.
It was a soul charge, and
Okay.
it should have worked actually, but he just delayed it in a weird way, so that I
Yeah.
hit him on exactly the frame where it doesn't work.
I think it was just he was because you had already used your 2 wall bounces, so potentially he just wasn't really prepared for the wake up situation to be what it was off of the low kick and stuff. That's my guess.
Yeah.
He decides to stick with the stage again. Very, very surprising.
I don't know.
So yeah, we have a lot more mid-range 3A4 AGA kind of stuff. No, reverse ledge, interesting.
I think he wanted to do 2-2A
Yeah, okay.
instead of 6-6A.
So something that I've noticed is that he's using a lot of I think that's 66BB, the unsafe 2-hit string, as kind of like a punish, kind of like there. And so, have you ever thought about like potentially throwing out a GI to beat the follow-up attack? Because I find that more often than not, Ivy's and Saiyne in this set will end up going for a follow-up attack after that thing on hit.
So that's kind of one of the things where it's like I've been playing Saiyne so much, and you see I did it right there.
Right. Yeah.
I've been playing Saiyne so much that like the mind games are a bit like hard to see because they're from other matches as well.
Sure.
But in the past, I used to always do that. Like it was my option almost 100% of the time, and he would get hit by it like almost 100% of the time. And then just like slowly he started.
It's just
being a lot
evolved
more
into
patient.
kind of
Yeah.
the extra level to the point where both players aren't really doing all that much, and we're kind of on the screen we're dealing with Yomi level 1, but what's actually going on is Yomi level 5.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Now, even though Saiyne is
Nice block off of the 2-2K.
Yeah.
I miss the days where I used to be able to block that on reaction. Oh, nice
I'm
background
not-
too.
Not entirely convinced it's reactable anymore.
Yeah, I'm just talking about SE4.
Right.
Nice duck. You were ducking the grab, or you were just going to do wall rising B no matter what?
I thought he was gonna grab.
Okay. Yeah, he's kind of gone in for that sort of thing maybe about 3 or 4 different times.
Yeah. I don't really know how to articulate it, but there are certain spots where he tends to go for CS. That,
Yeah.
I feel like I can sniff out.
So it's really more a matter of just the predictability of the command grab rather than the tool itself.
What do you mean?
I mean to say that the tool, the idea of him going for a command grab in that situation is a good idea, but because you are used to him using the command grab in that situation, it's never going to work because he always does it. It's leaning on a, like in a vacuum, the tool and the option is a good idea, but because it's predictable, no idea is
Yeah.
good, and no idea is a good idea when it's predictable.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's something that's very difficult even for me to try to describe to newer players where they're not sure like how people are beating them, or the ideas that they have aren't necessarily good ideas. And the way that I always describe it is the ideas that you have are good ideas, but you always go for these ideas in the same situations. So in a vacuum, the tools are good options, but no option is good if I know it's coming. You know,
Exactly.
if I know it's coming and it's still a good option, that's just a sign of a bad fighting game.
So the cool thing about 3 and 4 is that as long as he's doing
One of the first times we've actually seen this combo. And one of the first times well, I was about to say one of the first times we've seen the faraway range, but again, it's very interesting coming from an Amy player's perspective, seeing Ivy and Siegfried run at their opponents, which is not really something that I deal with all that often.
It's like the matchup definitely flows in a weird sort of way. But I definitely, it doesn't feel challenging with me as Siegfried to close the distance on her. This is just something I did to get soul charged without
Right.
putting her out.
Ooh, nice side stuff from Saiyne there. So you decided to drop the punish in order to create a situation like that.
Yep.
So what do you feel? This is just for my own edification. I haven't really dealt with Siegfried soul attack all that often. Is it good? Is it a better one?
I'd say it's probably like pretty middle of the road.
Okay.
It's a fantastic whiff punisher. I mean, it's I-16 and it has that much range, which is pretty crazy. And then it puts him into a mix-up. The mix-up on block is it's not very good.
Right.
But I think that but the counterplay to it is backstepping, right? So I can let it rip, and you're gonna backstep, but I mean, I still have soul charge.
Yeah.
I got guard damage on you, and I chipped you a bit. So all in all, I think that's good for me. But if I had to say its best application, I would say it's probably
As a whiff punisher.
as a whiff punisher. Yeah.
Is it good on block? -6 or something like that?
It's +4 on block, but it's into
Oh.
reverse side hold.
Oh,
But it's
okay,
into
okay,
reverse
okay.
side hold. Yeah, where his fastest option is I-18.
Right.
But it is +8 on hit, so it's very real on hit.
Okay.
It makes up, yeah.
He didn't capitalize off of
So we're at 2-1. Not really seeing well. The second that I say that we're not going to see guard damage is the time that the guard damage ends up coming up. So it looks like we definitely saw the potential whip parry. I'm assuming that 4B was supposed to be something else.
If I remember right,
charge from Saiyne.
I thought that he thought I was gonna wake up grab. So
Okay.
I just decided to do wake up 4B.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm noticing one of
That
the
is something I
things, it's very difficult for me to say this, but one of the things that I'm seeing a lot is that Saiyne isn't necessarily getting the damage that he could off of certain block punishment with Siegfried, but that's definitely one of the biggest trappings that Siegfried has, is that he recovers so quickly. The amount of block stun is so low compared to other characters that it's a very difficult timing to get used to actually get, like, the full amount of damage that you could potentially get from a block punishment situation.
Yeah. I think that there are definitely some things that Saiyne could refine about how he plays this matchup.
Yeah, it's just not that easy, you know?
No, it's not. I definitely don't think it's easy.
Yeah.
And this is kind of lame, right here, because I won the set with the reverse.
Oh,
charge.
yeah. Well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely it definitely seems like a very procedural way of playing this matchup, a procedural way of playing against this player. He didn't really seem to have to go into any kind of bag of tricks to find anything new. You had a certain strategy heavily centered around just strong mid kind of stuff when you were in the pocket really close in against Saiyne, and just relying on, guard damage to effectively win everything out. And it seems to have worked out spectacularly.
Yeah. I think that I can kind of, because, like, unless he understands Siegfried doesn't have, like, super good mix-ups. So I think that I kind of try to substitute that with guard damage to force people to make a decision and
Sure.
try and make bad decisions against me.
Frankly speaking, it's not that much different than Siegfried versus Amy in a lot of those kinds of situations. Things like, I always find Siegfried players are doing 3A4 after, for instance, like 2-2B on block, which makes sense. Really, the only way that I can beat 3A4 at that point is if I had just gone 2-2B and just immediately started mashing again. And, if I'm right about that, I get, what, like a 2A or a 3A, something like that.
Yeah.
So, I can definitely understand that sort of thing. So it seems to me, if you were in Saiyne's position, you would say that I would think that using SS would be the way to go in terms of making an adaptation that might change things up a little bit here.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing I could say is that, like, I don't know, he just needs to force me to make a decision, because I feel like I'm not really... When I fight against Saiyne, I don't really feel like I'm doing much. I feel like I'm kind of just... Like, I can just run the Siegfried game plan.
Yeah.
And it's effective, like, both against him and against Ivy.
Sure.
And I don't really have to... I think that maybe if he placed his Calamity Symphony differently, that might also be effective, because a big way that I break Calamity Symphony is by expecting it.
Right.
Because there's a lot of, like, situations where Saiyne uses it a lot, and Ivy players in general use it a lot. But so yeah, I think Summon Suffering would be a very effective way to get me to have to adapt my playstyle more, and maybe get me to panic a bit. Because...
Yeah, playing devil's advocate on Saiyne's side, I can definitely see him saying that SS would not necessarily be effective, if only, again, because of what we were talking about, where the fact that he is using SS, he would have to not only be using SS, but using it as a grab at different times. Because when you only broke CS a handful of times, and the other times you ended up ducking into a pretty substantial punish. And so I can definitely see that making him more wary about trying to use grabs in that way. So potentially he has to be using, I guess that's kind of what he was doing with, like, jamming 66BB, in so many situations to try and, like, catch some of those ducks. But it just simply, it's kind of what you were talking about, where you're just mitigating the amount of damage that you could potentially get, because 66BB, it's not exactly the scariest thing in the world. So you are allowing him those little small wins if it means that it's going to allow you to win overall.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to phrase it, is that I definitely like allow, especially as Siegfried, I think it's important to allow your opponent like small wins, like small damage opportunities, because you have to remember that like it's Siegfried, he does so much damage.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna like 2 slide Bs is like 80 damage.
Yeah.
And it's not a hard move to land by any stretch of the imagination.
And it's not even just that; it's also the guard damage. I mean,
Yeah.
the guard damage was I wouldn't even say the unsung hero in that set. It was pretty obvious that was something that was gargantually imperative when it came to all 3 games.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a really, really huge part, especially of those matches.
Do you find that this kind of style is as effective against other Ivy players, or is there something that trips you up with other Ivy players?
No, I'd say that this kind of style is equally effective against other Ivy players. I think that Saiyne is actually one of the better players at dealing with it. But I think that if I had to say the thing that really kind of kills him is that sometimes I do overextend. Like he's backstepping and I'm trying to hit him and it's not working, and I'll whiff, and he doesn't do anything about it. And like
he gets surprised.
Yeah, especially if Siegfried like whiffs an A slide B, I know it can be like it's hard to whiff punish, but there's potentially even a little mix up around it, right?
Yeah, the reverse mix up, yeah.
Yeah, but he doesn't even he just continues to back off.
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't even try to get damage off of it, and I think that hurts him a lot in the long run, because I feel even more like I can just kind of not really care about how I use A slide B. It feels like there's almost no consequences.
Yeah, I mean, again, coming from the Amy perspective, trying to whiff punish the A slide B in the way that you want to, it's so tempting, but it is pretty dangerous, and you can get burned pretty easily. So I can understand Saiyne's hesitation there. I understand both sides of it. I understand the hesitation, and I understand that you simply have to deal with that.
Right, but at the same time, like she does have, she's got a lot more range than Amy. Like
this is true, yeah.
So it's like if he tries to like backstep or something out of the whiff punish, that's a lot less likely to happen. And like she has big, she can 6-6A and it'll be like everything but base hold.
Mm-hmm.
And like I feel like she has bigger options that can like actually hurt him. And like, and if she thinks he's gonna stay in base hold, she can run up and do 2-2B, which does a grip of damage. So yeah, I think that I think that like it's hard, but you have to try. Like you have to go for it, I think, because or else he just wins neutral for free. Like he can just sit there and whiff, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the idea of I guess overall the idea is playing passively against a Siegfried player who understands the spacing game is just simply not an option. It is to beat a Siegfried player who does something like that, you will simply have to commit to certain options, and you're going to get blown up sometimes, but other times you're potentially going to win out, and you have to take that bet. You have to play the game. You can't just simply hope that everything unfolds in the way that you want it to.
Right. Another option is to go for something small. Like if I whiff A slide B and he does like a 2A, it's going to punish, like no matter what.
Right.
Like granted, it's not great on hit.
Yeah, it's trashy.
Do a ton of damage, but he's getting damage. He's doing something.
So if and essentially just lean on the fact that that situation will happen over and over and over again, and hopefully all these little small hits. It's actually, I would argue, an international way of looking at it. Americans, in my opinion, don't really think about fighting games in that way, where we tend to try to go for harder reads. This isn't necessarily Soul Calibur centric either. It seems that international players from Europe and Asia will go for something that's a little bit an aim small, miss small kind of thing, where it's just like these little tiny peppering hits, and eventually it's all just going to come crumbling down at the end of the round.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean. And Saiyne is actually really good at both of those.
He's such an interesting guy. He has such an interesting style. Hopefully at some point, assuming this whole thing is a massive success, I'll be able to have Saiyne on to not necessarily talk about a match with you, but to have a match with him, just to have Saiyne more just in my life would be really great.
He's a very beautiful person.
He's a very charismatic person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, Link, thank you for coming on to have our first guest appearance on Eye of a Samurai. I hope it was an enjoyable experience.
It's quite rare that I bless the mortals with my presence, so you're welcome.
Yeah, that is true. So we're really happy about that. And for everybody who has stayed for the entire video, thanks very
But
much.
I just add in one more thing.
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah. It's just that I think that the thing that, and I just feel like now that I'm on it, I should probably say this. The thing that probably started my like path to actually being a good player was an Eye of the Samurai video that you made for me like
Yeah,
4 years ago now, probably.
something like that.
Yeah. But I don't know. That's it. And that video helped me a lot, and I just wanted to say that.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I already knew that, but still, it's nice to know that without me, you would have become stayed a trash player, and I would have been, a 3-time Winter Brawl champion, an SC5, and an ECT champion, and so good on me. Instead of getting all those tournament wins, I made a single video.
Yep.
What a great idea
Was it
by
really
me.
worth it?
Yeah.
Was this really the path you wanted to go down?
It's not necessarily the path I wanted, but perhaps it was the path that I deserved.
I'd say that's accurate.
Yeah. But thanks again for everybody who is watching, and I hope to see you guys next time. All right. Thanks very much.